Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The terror madness continues, and that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Overnight, French authorities kill one suspected terrorist, perhaps the mastermind of the Paris attack, and another blew herself up. 8 others have been arrested, which could allow the French to gain many insights into ISIS. Next week, French President Hollande will come to Washington to try to convince a reluctant President Obama to step up ground activities against the ISIS terror group in Syria. As the world knows, Mr. Obama does not want to wage a full war against the jihad. He prefers half measures and rhetoric.
There will be setbacks and there will be successes. The terrible events in Paris were obviously a terrible and sickening setback. Even as we grieve with our French friends, however, we can't lose sight that there has been progress being made.
And what progress might that be, Mr. President? Over the last few weeks, a Russian airliner has been blown out of the sky by ISIS. Hundreds have been killed or wounded in Paris. An international soccer game has been postponed in Germany because of terror threats. And a massive migrant crisis continues to confound the world. So I ask again, what progress are we talking about here, Mr. President? The ISIS savages continue to hold the city of Raqqa, Syria, where they've established command and control. The terror group is said to be making $1 million a day selling stolen oil. ISIS savages are now embedded in dozens of countries, including here in the USA. Just today, Reuters is reporting that Honduran authorities are holding 5 Syrian nationals, all holding stolen Greek passports, who are heading to the USA. And believe me, they would have no trouble crossing the southern border. So any honest observer would have to conclude that progress against ISIS is scant or non-existent. President Obama's strategy has been to outsource the ground fight against ISIS inside Iraq to the Iranians, so they are gaining more power over Baghdad. American bombers have caused some damage to ISIS, but not enough to alter their terror activities. By backing away from the Syrian situation, President Obama has stimulated hundreds of thousands of desperate people to flood into other countries. He's also allowed the Russian villain Putin to bomb American allies inside Syria. Is this progress? Anyone? Talking Points well understands that millions of Americans don't even care about President Obama's performance. They like him. That's that. But there comes a point when a disaster has to be confronted. And right now, Americans' foreign policy is a disaster, which will have unintended consequences for we the people, perhaps lethal consequences. Finally, we can find few military, intelligence, or foreign policy experts who support President Obama's contention that progress is being made in the war on terror. Almost nobody believes that. And that's the memo. Now for the top story reaction, joining us from Cincinnati, Republican presidential contender Ben Carson. Very specifically, Doctor, there is a sense of urgency now about ISIS. All right? They're on the march. How would you defeat the movement or at least beat them back for the time being?
Well, we need to recognize that it is really an existential threat to us as a nation. You know, they're part of the global jihadist movement. And what I would do is take the war to them very specifically by getting our allies in the area. You know, we have many traditional allies in the area, you know, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, as well as our NATO allies, because the war is against all of us, you know, and I would cut off their oil because that's where they get a lot of their revenues from.
Okay, but that's a Trumpism too. He said that early on, you get the oil. But how do you cut off the oil? How do you, look, Jordan's bombing them, Egypt is involved with fighting ISIS, Saudi Arabia involved with fighting them in Yemen. So you've got to have a plan, Doc. I mean, and I'm not saying any American politicians with a cogent plan at this point. Nobody.
Yeah, the French have already started bombing the oil fields, but I say you have to either destroy the oil fields or you have to take them, and we can utilize, you know, the Kurds who are already in that area, particularly in eastern Syria, as well as our special ops people. I think some elements that work with us, of the Iraqis and of the Syrians, the moderate groups, it's a big comprehensive program, and you have to really take the fight to them, and you have to strangulate them in terms of the ease of access that they have with cash through world banking systems.
Okay, but
I think
all
we also
of that,
have to.
Doc, here's where all the politicians, including you, with all due respect, you've got to have specific. Now, last couple of nights ago, I said Article 5 of NATO means an attack on one nation is attack on all. So that NATO should immediately be galvanized together, and foot soldiers and air should be raised to go into Syria to get ISIS. Now, you can do it a number of different ways tactically, and I don't think we should be telling the ISIS savages what we're going to do. But the first step is to get NATO engaged, to get a formal declaration of war on ISIS. Would you oppose that?
No, I wouldn't oppose that. As I said, we need to get all of our allies involved, both the ones in the Middle East and the NATO allies involved and committed to this.
Okay, but that's not being done. It's not, Hollande wants it, the president of France. We don't hear much from Merkel. We don't hear much from Britain. We don't hear anything from Barack Obama. So there's no leadership.
That's because we're not leading.
Yeah. I mean, but you have to basically say, look, we're going to commit enough troops to the theater to beat these people. And that isn't being done. I don't think it's going to be done under President Obama. I do not think the man is going to do it. He's got 50, he puts 50 soldiers in there. It's ridiculous.
It's not going to be done, and it's not going to be done with, a first phone call. There have been multiple phone calls. We have to call the Department of Defense and tell them what the plan is, what our goal is, and ask them, how many troops do we need? Do we need ground troops? Do we just need special ops people? No, they are supposed to be experts in that area.
All right, the NATO forces, if they would go in,
as well,
would solve the refugee problem somewhat as well. Because if you send NATO troops in, they establish safe zones so these poor people don't have to go to Europe and the United States. That being said,
but we can't depend on them. We can't depend on them. We actually should ask them to get involved without question.
Well, we should declare war.
But we can't depend on them.
If the NATO nations don't declare war, then they don't have to be a part of NATO anymore. I mean, look, why do we have NATO? Why is it there? It's to protect the world from this kind of stuff. It's frustrating. Well, now, you as a Christian, I got to ask you this, and I only have a short time with you.
Okay.
You as a Christian, all right, you know there are suffering migrants. You know there are suffering people in Syria and other places. There's a movement not to take any of them in the United States. What do you say?
I say we have to be extremely wise. If you were trying to infiltrate that group with terrorists, you would see a golden opportunity here. So we need to make sure that that's not being done. So the vetting process cannot be unilateral. It cannot just be, one side, the administration saying, yes, we've vetted them, this is great. It needs to be done in a way that's transparent, that everybody can look at and say, yes, this is satisfactory. Yeah. If you don't do that, then you can't accept them.
Almost impossible with the bureaucracy the way it is. But I still think if NATO got involved and we set those safe zones up, that the refugees could go back there and we wouldn't have to deal with this madness. Doctor, we appreciate your time.
And that's what I've said all along. That's the goal. Absolutely. Thank you.